Hi, my name is Derek Ganshorn, and I'm the Executive Director of the Homeless Garden Project. And I'm really thrilled to welcome you to the kickoff of our 21-day Racial Equity Habit Building Food Challenge. This is our first year partnering with the challenge, and we hope to generate broad local community engagement in it in order to embrace our vision of a thriving and inclusive community, workforce, and local food system. Last June, after George Floyd was killed, we at HGP did a lot of soul searching, and we felt we needed to find a way to make a difference. We recognized the link between addressing racism and our mission to help people find the tools they need to build a home in the world. We began to explore ways to address racism here in our community and our food system, beginning with ourselves. I was so excited when I found the challenge, and I resolved to partner with it this year when it began in April. Visitors to the Food Solutions New England website are invited to join the challenge anytime during the year, but I felt there was a power to join with the more than 7,000 people across our country during this period, April 5th through 25th, and engage with our community to receive daily emails to encourage learning and reflection. I'm inspired by the possibility to learn from one another and find common ground for action. The Homeless Garden Project provides job training, transitional employment, and support services to people experiencing homelessness. And in direct complement, we operate a community education and volunteer program that serves about 2,500 people each year, but has been greatly reduced during the pandemic. We've really missed the community and the role the community plays in supporting our trainees as we work together or share lunch on the farm. Though this challenge is very different from being together on the farm, we're excited to work together with you to achieve our mission and vision. We continue to focus our work on individuals experiencing homelessness, and we believe this equity work will strengthen everything we do. And now I am so pleased to introduce our Congressman as today's keynote speaker, Representative Jimmy Panetta. Jimmy is a distinguished and decorated public servant, having volunteered and served during the Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, where he was awarded a Bronze Star for his work with Special Forces. Upon returning to the Central Coast, he served as a board member of the Veterans Transition Center, where he focused on ending veterans' homelessness and improving resources for his fellow veterans and their families. Prior to taking office, Jimmy served as Monterey County's Deputy District Attorney. Now Jimmy advocates for residents in California's 20th District, including Monterey and San Benito counties, as well as parts of Santa Cruz and Santa Clara counties. During his time in Congress, Jimmy has fought to ensure that our agriculture industry and its farmers and farm workers are taken care of, for immigration reform, the continued protection of our pristine coastline and environment, affordable and accessible healthcare, to reduce gun violence, and for our veterans to receive the benefits they were promised and deserve. I'm so honored to welcome Jimmy Panetta.
Unmute myself. Thank you. Thanks, Dari. I appreciate this opportunity. And thank you very much for the music, the Senderos, and having to pop on and listen to that. It's better music than I normally hear when I get on my Zoom calls. So I appreciate that. I'm very happy to be a part of the Homeless Garden Project Spring Equinox events. Although I'm not happy that I have to spend it in my office here at home. And I'd much rather be in either the developing Pogonip or the delightful Natural Bridges garden there in Santa Cruz. But obviously thrilled to be a part of this event that really supports our gardens and ultimately our gardeners at the Homeless Garden Project. And so thank you very much. Thank you, Dari, for providing me with this chance today to do it. And obviously, thanks everybody who's tuning in. Thank you not just for being here on this Saturday morning, but thank you for supporting the Homeless Garden Project. I think you know better than most that it's about supporting this type of project, which not only supports your gardens there, it basically ultimately is about, like I said, supporting the gardeners, the people who are going there for a place to heal, a place to get back on their feet, and also then becoming continuing to become a productive part of our society. And it really is, the Homeless Garden Project really is a place for our gardeners, as I said, our gardeners to grow, and a place that our community grows as well. As you know, and as we all know, when you, for most things to grow, it takes a lot of time and a lot of hard work. And what I have seen recently, and I think a lot of times what we're experiencing, is that there's a lot of short-term thinking and a lot of instant gratification that's desired in a world of 30-second videos. We're seeing this more and more, unfortunately, that people are relying on this instant gratification as a way to get things done. But unfortunately, as we know, and especially if you've worked in a garden, that's not a way to get hard things done. And gardening, I believe, teaches persistence, it teaches patience, and it teaches practicality. It's very similar to what's needed when it comes to governing, I can tell you. And fortunately, before, when I lived in Oakland, California for a little bit, when I was up there, I had a rose garden. And I can tell you, I started off when we moved in the house, there was one rose bush, but I grew it to about a garden of 30 rose bushes. And what I realized is that it was a constant battle. Yet there was something that I got out of it that is indescribable when you actually were completed, when it was completed, or at least during the season. Because what you realize is gardening is never done and it's never over. You're always trying to make it better. And that, you first try to, deal with the planting, and then you deal with the pruning of your roses. But then you find the right variety, and then you have to find the right fertilizer. And then you're fighting off the aphids, and you're fighting off the mildew. And then the one thing that I had the biggest battle with in dealing with my roses was the deer, and learning how to deal with the deer. And trust me, I used everything and anything from foil streams to string to coffee grinds. And I even went as far as buying mountain lion urine that sure as heck didn't work as well. But one thing I realized was I came to a compromise with them. And that I realized that if I put chicken wire around the base of my roses and allowed them to grow up, they couldn't get to these parts of the roses. And I kind of gave them the bottom part of the rose bush. So it was a compromise. And let me tell you, it worked, which I was surprised. It was a lot of work, but that's what it takes to figure out gardening, as we know. And what I like, though, is obviously it was a work that I needed for my garden, for myself, obviously, mentally, but it was also a work for my neighborhood, because you don't know how many times I got little notes in my mailbox from people who would walk by and say, "Thank you for your rose garden." And what I started to see throughout the neighborhood is other people who I didn't even know started planting roses in their garden. And so you realize that by basically, working, patience, persistence, you can affect not just yourself, you affect your community, you affect your neighborhood. And it kind of reminds me of Thomas Jefferson's ideal of what is called usufruct. And that's sort of what that is the responsibility to preserve the fertile topsoil from landowner to landowner. And I believe what that does is it embodies that obligation of stewardship for the future. And I think that's what you're doing today by supporting the Homeless Garden Project. We know that we are bolstering that sense of stewardship that our gardeners there at the Homeless Garden Project feel. And therefore, I believe it's bolstering our community there in Santa Cruz. So I'm glad to tell you, though, that although, we see that sense of usufruct in Santa Cruz, and despite what you're seeing on TV, there really is that sense in Washington, D.C. amongst some of my colleagues. And definitely when it comes to the legislation that we've produced, especially the pieces that we passed out of Congress recently. Pieces that not only deal with the pandemic, but deal with the inequities that were highlighted so much during the pandemic, be it from the death of George Floyd to the over 500,000 deaths from COVID-19. Now, what we passed recently was the American Rescue Plan, a $1.9 trillion package. And yes, there was an immediacy about it, which had to be in order to have that sense of that wartime effort that this administration, the Biden administration, understands what it takes to defeat COVID-19 and to actually help us win that race of injections versus infections at this point. And so when it comes to the immediate aspects of this bill, you're right. We passed and signed into law a major bill that's going to put more shots in arms, more checks in people's pockets, more kids back in schools safely, more employees back into their jobs, keep police and firemen on the streets with the federal funding that's there for state and local governments, and help more employers get back in business. Basically, as I see it, and how the President Biden looked at it, it was time to start leaning into fixing the pandemic and start to fix our economy. In other words, it's basically making sure that we start gardening with a focus on our food and on our housing so that we overcome the short-term insecurity with long-term solutions. And we did that when it came to the nutrition aspect of it and the housing aspect of it. Now, every week when I'm here and able to, I volunteer at a food bank, and I go out there and I put the boxes of the food into people's cars or give it to them face to face, the people that walk up. And what we've seen throughout this pandemic, unfortunately, is obviously the growing inequality when it comes to those who have food and those who don't. And that I've seen those lines get longer and longer and longer. Now, I can tell you we address that in a long-term fashion because you can't, when it comes to hunger, you can't food bank your way out of it. You have to focus on long-term solutions, and that entails focusing on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, CalFresh, as it's known here in California, or otherwise known as food stamps. And we did that in our first few relief packages dealing with COVID, in that we early on, we expanded SNAP by 15% and extended that 15% expansion to June 24th. We then ensured that children get their meals who weren't in school by increasing the EBT program by millions of dollars, allowing them to have this food even though they don't go to schools. And then with the American Rescue Plan, we focused on the Supplemental Nutrition Program by extending that all the way at 15% addition, extending that out to September of 2021. We then added hundreds of millions of dollars to ensure that women and infants through the WIC program get the benefits that they need. And we provided funding to the emergency houseless shelters to be reimbursed for food services for those who were there given food and are under 25 years old. I believe we've laid the foundation for long-term changes that need to be done to the SNAP program to make them permanent. And it gives us evidence in the Agriculture Committee that I'm on, that when the 2023 Farm Bill comes around, we can then point to this type of program, this extended type of program, this bolstered type of program when it comes to food assistance, to make these types of changes, not just short-term, but long-term. And on the Ways and Means Committee that I'm on as well, we did that with this program. See, like I said, this wasn't just about the immediate focus on COVID. The American Rescue Plan was transformational in a lot of ways. And you look at the child tax credit and us increasing for low and middle income families so that we can cut child poverty in half by increasing the child tax credit. Looking at the earned income tax credit, we tripled that in this package so that we can ensure that those low income employees basically get credit on their taxes at the end of the year, triple the amount, so that we let people know that no matter what type of job you have, the federal government is going to help you out, which is very important. Like I said, it wasn't just an immediate fix. When you look at the American Rescue Package, it was a long-term thinking, a long-term fix, especially when it comes to low income, and especially when it comes low income families, especially when it comes to our food nutrition programs as well. And I believe there was long-term thinking that we have to have when it comes to our houselessness. Now, obviously, you know, early on as how government has looked at houselessness as sort of a local issue. It's then become a state issue. And as I see it right now, and as I say it right now, houselessness is an all hands on deck issue. And that's exactly why the federal government needs to be a part of the solution as well. Now, in my limited time in office, I've been able to secure $76 million in federal grants for houselessness and affordable housing just here on the Central Coast that has been combined through a number of programs: the home program for our houselessness, the HUD-VASH program for our homeless veterans, and the community development block grants for more affordable housing. And during the pandemic, yes, there was a situation that needed to be addressed in regards to people losing their homes. That's why you saw moratoriums put in place on evictions and foreclosures. That's why you saw billions, with a B, billions of dollars in these relief package going towards rental assistance so that people can stay in their homes and that, yes, landlords can get paid their rent. And you saw billions in Section 8 emergency housing vouchers for those who are currently or recently houseless. And you saw $100 million go towards something, this is what I like, thinking outside the box. Like I said, transformative. $100 million go to counseling services for those that are houseless or on the verge of it due to the pandemic. And that includes mental health aspects of it. And then another thing that doesn't get a lot of attention is that prior to the pandemic, you have to realize there was an estimated 1.5 million children who were houseless. Now, with schools closed, we have a very hard time tracking that number and identifying those homeless children. And so that's why in this latest bill, we allocated $800 million to identify those children that don't have homes. This includes mental health services, technology needs, and connecting families to housing options. I do believe it's these types of investments that they're not going to immediately fix the houselessness problem that we have. We understand that. But it's that need to lay the foundation with these types of long-term solutions that I believe will help prevent more people, more families, and more children from being houseless. I believe this is the federal government's version of usufruct, and that when it comes to the Homeless Garden Project, you understand that this is what it takes to build gardens. You understand that this long-term thinking is what it takes, this persistence, this investment, and this patience to produce vegetables, to produce fruits, and to produce flowers, obviously. And I believe it's this type of long-term thinking that we're supporting today, and it's how we continue to build and prosper in this rose garden that we call our community, Santa Cruz, here on the Central Coast. And so once again, I appreciate this opportunity to be a part of it. And I appreciate that I get the chance to introduce two speakers coming up next who have a real good idea of the ideal of usufruct. And that's Karen Spiller and Curtis Ogden. Karen is a professor in sustainable food systems at the University of New Hampshire. And Curtis Ogden is a senior associate at Interaction Institute for Social Change in Boston. Together, Curtis and Karen spearheaded Food Solutions New England, a network of people, organizations, and businesses that work together to build a just, sustainable, and resilient food system that works for everyone. FSNE, as it's known, created the 21-day Racial Equity Habit Building Challenge, a shared journey that brings thousands of people together as they work to dismantle racism that exists, unfortunately, in our food system. The impact of their challenge is obviously known nationwide. And so I'm absolutely thrilled that we get to see it make its way right here in Santa Cruz with the Homeless Garden Project. This pandemic, as we know, really has kind of pushed us to confront food insecurity and racial injustice that really impacts everybody, not just here on the Central Coast, but everybody across this country. And so it's an absolute honor to have Karen and Curtis here today to share their experience to help more people, not just on the Central Coast, but all across our country, understand the challenges that many in our community face when it comes to these huge, huge hurdles. With that, I'll turn it over to Karen and Curtis.
Thank you so much, Congressman Panetta. Pleasure to meet you, and your words ring deeply for us. Everything that you've mentioned about facing COVID, usufruct, bringing in this notion of really belonging to one another and having that community accountability. Thank you so much. Couldn't have asked for better framing. I know that Karen wanted to share a little bit more about the history of the challenge, and since you've been lifting up, I think, front and center values that we need to hold on to, right, as we make our way in all times, and especially these times, we want to share a little bit more about that as well.
So in the history of the challenge, in the context of Food Solutions New England, a 6-regional state network on food systems, we're multi-ethnic, multicultural, and we are organizations, networks still, individuals across the food system. And it goes from processing and distribution to policy, government, health, healthcare, nutrition, food access, affordability, food waste, soil health, science, and land ownership, and collaborating across all of that with farmers and fishermen and food system advocates, eaters, and anyone, and we always think about this, anyone eats has a seat at our table. And when we think about the challenge came from one of our core values, that Curtis will share the values in a minute, but it really was, we're gathering and gathering, we're building trust and around our shared values. And it became clear that we had to transform this food system, but we had to understand that we first had to transform ourselves collectively and individually. And we made a non-negotiable commitment to racial equity, and again, as a core value. And we wanted to build our collective skill and will and to be accountable to that. And we always talk about it, taking the first step is speaking up on behalf, that's the ally, and then the accomplice is the one who will lay down their lives for us, using our power and privilege. We're always talking about anywhere we are, we have power and privilege, and using that, whatever we have, wherever we have, to contribute to building and sustaining an equitable, racially just, and fair food system that will feed and serve us all. So it was a commitment that led us to create the 21-Day Racial Equity Challenge. And with the blessings of Dr. Eddie Moore Jr., he's the founder of the Privilege Institute and White Privilege Conference Symposium, and Debbie Irving, the author of Waking Up White, and Dr. Marguerite Pennick Parks. She's a professor at University of Wisconsin. We adapted their challenge with a focus on food systems. And that was in 2014. We're always amazed and humbled by what we were doing just for us so that we could be true to our values and take action. That in the first year we had 1,200, and the sixth year, 2020, we had 8,000 people participating with us. Over 700 organizations committing to doing it, 50 states, all 50 states in 20 countries. And we were extremely, we were humbled by the fact that in all of the pandemic of COVID, the pandemic of racism, the pandemic of sustainable economies, that people were leaning in and wanting to be different. So that was how the challenge began. Again, Curtis and I will always say it was for us. It was for us to build our skill and will. And again, so humbled by the fact that so many others felt the call, felt the need, felt the earnest, non-negotiable commitment to join us. So that's a snapshot, Curtis. That gets us there, right?
It definitely gets us there. Yes. And so I'll just say a little bit more. And I did want to ask Congressman how much longer you'd be with us, if there's anything you might want to say additionally, or any questions you have before I know you're very busy. We want to appreciate your time.
No, this is fascinating to know. And I think it obviously gives us hope that we're seeing that basically our legislation is kind of transcending down and making sure that you're supporting efforts that you're doing on the ground. I mean, that's exactly kind of, why we passed this type of federal funding, to make sure that you're able to continue doing the work that you're doing to affect everybody that can avail themselves of these programs. So thank you very much. I appreciate everything that you have done at that local level to include everybody. And I think obviously this past year has been very difficult for so many people in so many ways. And it's highlighted, like I said, the hunger and the inequality that has been and has grown in our communities, unfortunately. And clearly through your work, you're ensuring that you're trying to cut it off and address it. And I hope to continue to support it any way that I can. So just showing my appreciation for everything that you're doing, and so glad And it doesn't surprise me that the Homeless Garden Project is that foundation for your program to come into Santa Cruz, California, and ultimately spread throughout the Central Coast and hopefully all of California, so that we can ensure that we address the problems of inequality and hunger. So
Well,
thank you.
wonderful. Thank you. We are
Thank
so
you.
appreciative of your public service, especially in these times. And if you run into State Senator Marilyn Moore from Connecticut out there, she's a big friend and ally of ours. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And with that, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into the challenge. And then to be sure, we're not going to be talking at you the entire time. We will make some time for those of you who are joining us to break into some small groups and have some conversation. And Karen and I also wanted to demonstrate a little bit the spirit of how FSNE, Food Solutions New England, does its work. I'm going to say just a little bit more about FSNE. You'll see here on the screen that our mission really comes down to envisioning and working for a powerful food movement that democratically transforms New England's food system. So New England is made up of 6 states. We've got Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Collectively, we probably have about 1/3 the population of the state of California. We know that together we're much stronger than operating as independent little states, and we share a bioregion, and we share a cultural heritage, albeit we also recognize that that cultural heritage is rooted in oppression of indigenous peoples who are still very much with us. And so we hold that term New England with all of the complexity that it has within it, even as we try and forge positive relationships with the indigenous peoples who are still with us, the Abenaki, the Passamaquoddy, the Wampanoag, and others. So just wanting to make that clear as we continue to work for a food system that is sustainable, just, and resilient. And along the way, over this last 10 years that we've been working together at this, knowing that this is at least generational work, we've been clear that beyond what we do, how we do really is fundamental. And so we have a shared set of values that really guide everything that we do. And those come down to democratic empowerment, understanding that through continued consolidation of the economy, of food enterprises and corporations, of land. We see rich people buying up a lot of land right now and farmland. That is very much counter to our vision of cooperatively owned, stewarded land and other food resources, and how we govern ourselves. Another core value is racial equity and dignity for all. So we have recognized that part of the original sin of this country, of course, was to enslave people from the African continent, to subjugate the people who are already here, to get the agricultural economy going. And so our very roots are steeped in that blood, and we want to lift that up and not shy away from it, and put racial justice and dignity for everyone at the center of our work. And certainly sustainability. We recognize that our current economy is very extractive of ecosystems that are our lifelines, that are the web that supports us. And so we can hardly do this work at a local level if it isn't fundamentally sustainable and respectful of ecosystems. And then trust. We discovered early on in this work, when we put a vision in front of a group of people at a gathering in Vermont, that we didn't quite have the trust we needed to move this region forward. And so we have been weaving trust slowly over time to build the foundation for our work together. And all of that is meant to strengthen the movement and its ability to achieve our food vision goals. And really our food vision at the moment upholds this idea that New England would produce at least 50% of what we consume in the region through both farming and fishing. So that gives you a little bit more about FSNE. And before we go any further to talk about the challenge, Karen and I wanted to give you a little taste about how we both build trust, connect, and also lift up the fact that doing this work for the food systems that we want is not just heady work. It's full-bodied and it's full being work. And so I want to invite people into a practice, and this comes from colleagues in the world of respectful confrontation and fierce civility work. They talk about the need to actually turn towards one another, to confront one another, not in an antagonistic way, but very much in the spirit of James Baldwin, who once said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Until we face history, until we face one another, until we face ourselves, until we face the truth, until we face the direction we might be headed that is not the direction we want. So if you'd like, inviting you to turn off your cameras, because I'm going to invite you into a little bit of a meditation, and Karen will then share a reading. So the invitation is, whether you are seated or standing, to just get comfortable. You can close your eyes, or if it's more comfortable, just avert your gaze. Just soften your gaze. And if you're seated, to feel the pelvis support you, that bowl that upholds your torso, your upper body. And if you're standing, which I am, to feel your feet firm on the ground and to feel the earth underneath you supporting you, to feel gravity that holds you upright in your full dignity as a human being. And as you feel that strength and that solidity, to find the place that's just 2 inches below your belly button. In the respectful confrontation, fierce civility world, we take a cue from ancient Chinese wisdom that sees the dantian as the energy source right there below our belly button, and invite you to concentrate there and take a deep breath in just below your belly, and to breathe out slowly. This is a source of energy to go with our grounding. And to take a second breath deep in and let that breath come up and fill your upper torso. And to release. And then again to breathe in, still into your center. And as you do that, just pay attention to what's going on inside your body. See what sensations you might notice. Without labeling anything or trying to chase anything away, just notice what's there. And continuing to breathe into your center, noticing those sensations, notice any feelings you might have, emotions. Again, not labeling, not trying to chase away, just noticing. And continuing to breathe into your center, feeling the ground under you. Notice any thoughts you may be having right now, without being wedded to them or thinking about those thoughts, just notice them. And continuing to breathe into your center, noticing what's going on inside of you. Bring your attention outside of the walls of your body, even with eyes closed. See if you can tune into your immediate surroundings. What's in your room, what's in your space. Just notice how it's influencing you, and you might be influencing your surroundings. And continuing to breathe in, noticing again what's moving inside of you and your immediate surroundings. Bring your attention beyond the immediate space, maybe beyond the walls of your apartment, your office, your condo, your house. What do you notice going on beyond the walls that might be influencing you just now? And continuing to breathe into your center, feeling that ground under you. Now, having noticed what's going on inside you, around you, just beyond the walls, see if you can tune into others on this Zoom call. Even though in 2 dimensions and with these flat screens, we're still connected. See if you can get a sense of how others on this Zoom call are influencing you, or you might be influencing them. Breathing in again into your center, feeling the ground under your feet, feeling the strength of your sit bones. Now bring your attention back inside your body. Just notice what's going on there. Thoughts, feelings, sensations. See if anything has shifted. And then again, one more deep breath into your center. and release. And when you're ready, open your eyes. If you want to turn on your camera, you can. And over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Curtis. Now we are here to say happy first day of spring. Happy first day of spring. And with the coming of spring means many things. You know, buds are pushing through the bark, tulips are inching up from the ground, and longer days, warmer nights, and everything is unfolding in front of us as a new and rejuvenated and restored. So there is a short piece I wanted to share of Carol Mullen, an African-American poet. Spring is budding green joy, fresh breeze and sunshine, birds singing, water running, children sloshing through puddles on the sidewalk. Spring breathes anticipation, green shoots sprouting from the earth, unfurling into flowers, the sweet scent of hyacinths, a baby bird learning how to fly. Spring sweeps the dust out of all our corners. As we wake up, as we look and listen to the promise of a morning sunrise, to joy unfolding, to a glowing new life. Carol Mullen shared those words. So with spring, like the earth around us, we're thinking of this time together as we want to wake up and we want to look more closely with new eyes. We want to listen more deeply with new ears to the promise of something different, being different, anew and renewed. And we're given this gift, another opportunity, another fresh canvas to create a vibrant, glowing new relationship, multiple new relationships, and communities of trust and belonging. So when you're entering into the challenge, that is one way when you're doing it in community, that you can have this shared experience with your shared values. And again, I guarantee you, you will be different on the other side. So Curtis, we're talking here about the challenge a little bit. I've already shared how we got here as a organization, but it really was, again, I just want to emphasize, it was us as Food Solutions New England, this 6-state network, wanting to be able to be true to our commitment for transformation of the food system to feed and service all, and knowing that unless we were able to change the dynamics, the outcomes, the lived experience around the inequities in our systems, and particularly food systems, we were not going to be able to say that we were successful, that we were able to shift, we were able to move on the continuum. So it's really important for us to do that. And that's why the challenge has been very anchoring for us, ongoing, ongoing. So Curtis, next slide. One of the things that we also find in terms of the challenge, we always are looking at how does it work? And it works, you sign up and you receive your daily prompts. I really want to emphasize here, these daily prompts are developed with lots of love, care, and intention. We think about what is going on currently in our universe, in our worlds, but we also want to make sure people are understanding their history, understanding how we got here, so that we can actually be active participants in, again, being something different, creating something different. And that comes in the form of daily prompts. It could be a resource, it could be a video, it could be a link to art, but it's always around thought questions that get you thinking deeply, more deeply about what you're learning, what you're experiencing. The content is ranging from racial equity and identity and socialization, which is really understanding who we are and how we got all these ideas and beliefs that we hold on to, so that we can actually start shedding some of that, as we're talking about spring, shedding some of our heavy clothing and our armor to be something different. We have always understanding our history, so there is the land, indigenous foodways, indigenous people, understanding where the first injustice happened with the land and land taking and land acquisition, however you want to think about it. We think about it, the food and farm workers, the people who are actually harvesting, planting and harvesting our crops. And that is always, again, regenerative, repatterning, just re-entering an understanding of who we are and what it requires for us to be something different. And so when we think about this as well, we set it up, it's online. So, those of us, go online and get your email. And then you have an opportunity, we have this discussion forum that gives you a chance to go online. Some people do love this online chat, and you're able to have a conversation and reflect on what you've experienced. Sometimes it's affirmation of what you already knew, but also, and sometimes it gives you an opportunity to have voice to those feelings, those experiences you've had where you just didn't know how to name it and speak it. But this discussion board is a place for you to have that kind of open space to use as you would like. We invite you also to record, journal, definitely journal what you're feeling, whether it's audio journaling, whether you do it in art, create a canvas, just expressing what you're feeling, expressing what you're seeing, or expressing what you like to see. And then we have, certainly social media is always available in terms of the Facebook and Instagram. But we're really inviting you to practice this. And that's why, when you're in a group, it's possible for you to be able to share and discuss and just lean in together. And, sometimes it's a matter of thinking about, okay, what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my work? What does it mean for my organization? What does it mean for hunger? What does it mean for the garden? What does it mean? What does it mean? And something that we've always been really intentional is, we started out with the prompts in an email, and then people said, okay, I really don't know how to do this challenge. So we added an orientation webinar, and then we've added a facilitator's opportunity because people wanted to do it. This is build a skill for me first. Once I feel I'm ready, I want others with me. Then I'm looking for, how do I do that? How do I bring other colleagues, other friends, other family, other people into the space I'm in this learning journey? And so this is where we created a discussion guide a couple of years ago in response to that request. And last year we did our first discussion workshop for facilitators that were in our region in New England. And so we're always, again, very responsive to what is needed for people to really embrace, engage, and be positioned for action. So last year, with the pandemics upon us, we tried something new, and we added a Reflection Friday. So it was an opportunity for those who were taking the challenge to come into a space just like this and have a guided discussion. Curtis and I would always kind of reflect on last week's learning, but you went into, just like you will soon, go into your breakout rooms and have a thought question and dialogue. And what we find with that opportunity there is that you get a chance to speak with people that are sharing your values, that are not in your organization, in your state, in your city and town. And it is really heartwarming, inspiring, all of the things that lift you up when you're in this community of people who are, they're from Alaska, they're in Wisconsin, they're in New York, but yet they are sharing my values, sharing what I am working so hard to create and maintain and live into, that it is, it's one of those things of it, we call it, we empower each other in that moment of time. So we really have found that to be a galvanizing space, because we're, again, Food Solutions New England and all of us in this work here in New England are looking for ways to amplify and build accomplices. Those, again, that will, power and privilege will give and lend open doors, pathways, and make those relationships happen for us. So that's a snapshot of how it works. Discussion guide, I mentioned that. That has really been a critical piece, because people always want to know, how do I do this? How do I bring people in? How do I lead it? And we use the word facilitators, but I always call us guiders. You know, we're in this because whenever you're in this, you have to schedule it. You have to, you know, shepherd people into it. But once you're in it, it is a shared journey. It's a shared walk. It's a shared learning. So it's not you standing as an expert around this. You're moving it together. And the guide helps you get that understanding and that framing, so you do not feel, again, to be an expert, but that you are in community. And that really is what the guide is designed for. So one of the things that we love is that it provides you some framing in terms of community agreements. You know, it's really always for us and Food Solutions New England and many other networks, Curtis and I are always wanting to build community agreements, because that's the place where Curtis will say what he needs to be brave and bold and comfortable and wanting to share his thoughts, that, you know, he wants it to be a place where there are no assumptions, you know. And I may say that for me, I want to be able to lean in with curiosity without judgment. So we pull from everyone in the group, what do they need for this space to be their space? And we end up with, you know, this whole curated piece of listing of things. And then we go through it with everyone and say, okay, are we going to, is there anything missing? Do we need to add? And then we make a commitment to be accountable to these commitments, accountable to myself and to each other. So that's just an example of one of the things that I love about the discussion guide, because it begins to build relationships in a different way than they might have been before. But, you know, there's samples there on letters to invite, other questions to ask, how to manage what we might call difficult conversations. Because whenever we have more than one person, we can have good conversations with ourselves, but whenever we have another conversation, we don't always have control over where those conversations go. So we need to be able to create the space to be able to leave that door open, but also be able to, again, accountable, safe space, brave space, bold space, and movement space for everyone.
Yeah, and I would just offer that the guide is going to mirror, or I should probably say that we're doing a facilitator training on March 25th. That's open to anybody who wants to join, two 2.5-hour sessions. And it will follow the arc of the discussion guide. And basically the 5 components are: how do you prepare yourself as a facilitator? How do you prepare the group? How do you prepare each session as an agenda? How do you think about intervening when those things come up in the course of a conversation? And then how do you extend the challenge? Because we find people not just extending the challenge as a challenge, but we're hearing examples of how the challenge has led to an equity summit, how the challenge has led to a food policy council now adopting equity as a central value, how this is actually leading to boards and organizations taking on the work. So as we like to say, this is not about 21 days. This is about 21 to 365 year after year after year. So there will be some focus on that as well. And in addition, just wanted to say, oops, going the wrong way here, that this challenge also fits centrally into the network impact areas that Food Solutions New England has adopted as a regional network. With everything else going on in our region, with wonderful initiatives like Farm to School and Farm to Institution, New Farmers Network, the Southern New England Farmers of Color Collaborative, we continue to have a 30,000-foot view of weaving connections, of advancing these values, including the practice of equity leadership, of holding a very big view of policy that is about food systems, that is about justice, but really is increasingly being couched in a vision of a Green New Deal. And then also a new shared narrative. What is the story we want to tell about food, food systems, our connection to land, our connection to one another? And really the challenge is threaded through all of this. So there are aspects of this woven together with our strategy. So I wanted to pause, Dari and team, to see if there are any questions before we send people into small groups to meet and talk a little bit about what they'd like to get out of the challenge. So I think the invitation is to either raise your hand or type a question. Anybody have a question about the challenge, how it works? How you might get the most out of it? Looking, not seeing any hands. Okay. You can raise your hand. Oh, so how long is the orientation on March 25th? So we've already had an orientation that was an hour. That's been recorded and can be accessed on the FSNE website. The March 25th is actually a training for facilitators. So each session is 2.5 hours long. We're trying to accommodate US coasters by having one in the morning and one in the afternoon. I think, Karen, what is it? It's 1:30 to 4 Eastern and then 10 to 12:30, something like that.
I'm going to drop the links in the chat, and it's 10:30. This is Eastern time. I can't translate the two, but it's 10:30 to 1, and then it's 1:30 to 4 Eastern Standard Time.
Great. Karen, there's a question here about what have others reported as impacts to their community in past years. You've been seeing a lot of this in higher ed.
Impacts, well, I mean, in institutions, policies and practices are changing, even purchasing practices of dining halls in terms of certainly local, but also more attention being paid to equitable hiring and business practices of those vendors and they have contracts with. Certainly what we find is that it does provide back to the shared language, the shared value, that you begin to look for commonalities as opposed to making assumptions that someone isn't thinking or isn't interested. And it gives you also that kind of oomph to move forward and make relationships that you might have avoided before. Building alliances on land access, building alliances on increased food distribution from repurposing food. So you get to be, we call it more solutionary in practice. And that's what we've seen happen. Even we're thinking recently, Curtis, we've been talking about even some of our commissioners of ag are looking at new ways to take conservation land and make it more land access. So different things are happening at different levels of practice.
Yes, and that relates to Christy's question here. Are there actions we take in the challenge, or is it more intellectual discussion? We are really trying to take it from discussion to action. And that said, depending on the prompt, the action may be different. We recommend actions. So when you're reflecting on your own identity or your own socialization around how you think about race and ethnicity, an action is to not just have that conversation with yourself, but to have it with others, to have it with your family, to have it in your organization. As we move deeper into the challenge and getting more solutionary, as Karen says, and we start talking about things like land reparations or rematriation, lifting up resources to find the tribal groups, for example, that are engaged in that work, and talking to your friends, your neighbors, how you can get involved with that kind of work, or plenty of campaigns going on around workers. Food Chain Workers Alliance as a colleague organization. We have Migrant Justice here in the region called New England, working around dairy. So there's policy possibilities, finding campaigns, certainly raising money, educating your neighbor, go get your cousin, as they say, get others on board with you. And then Karen, if you want to try and facilitate for your own organization, is it best to do it yourself first and then introduce it to the organization after you've done the facilitator guide training?
I think it's really helpful for you to have gone through the challenge first to actually understand it, or at least walk yourself through it. But we invite you I'm going to give you the link for the facilitators orientation. Invite you to join us. I mean, it's also a place for you to see how this will fit in your own journey of development around this. Yes, but what we found is that the facilitators' work came as a result of people having taken the challenge, having used the challenge, and were bringing it into wherever they were, whether it was their organization, their church, whether it was their other community and agency environments. I did put in the chat, the first YouTube is the launch link. So the launch is the orientation, general orientation. And I'm going to put in next the link for the facilitators. I think I'm going to put it in the next one. The facilitators.
So while you're doing that, Karen, there's a question from Bruce here about giving an example of a prompt and what we hope to accomplish by it. I was just going to our master list here, and one of them is about the racial wealth gap, for example. One day we'll be focused on that. And so there is a section on learning where there are some links where you're actually invited to look at the breakdown of wealth in the United States by race. So there's actually a graphic representation of that. There's also a resource from an organization called Prosperity Now to look at how different states are doing with respect to the racial wealth gap. And so that certainly has a lot to do with our food systems in terms of who has access to land and capital. And then there are some reflection questions related to that. So what comes up as you're taking that information, right? How does that feel to you? How often do you consider the implications of the racial wealth gap in the food system? And then there's an invitation to act. So there are policy initiatives out there to take a look at. There's also just the invitation to talk more about wealth, which in this country we don't, right? People do not talk about inherited wealth. People do not talk about money, to be much more forthcoming about that. We have a link around a racial wealth gap simulation from our friends at Bread from the World as something else that you might do. And then there's some deeper, other prompts to go deeper. And we're trying to keep it broad so that it's not just articles to read or blog posts, but podcasts to listen to, videos to watch, other resources to consider. So the hope is just to normalize this way of thinking and not just talking, but then as this seeps in, spurring people to want to do something. Let's do something together. So with that, maybe, Cloud, we can go to some small breakouts just so people can meet each other for a little bit. Maybe we do this just for 8 minutes so we can come back and see what questions come up before we close. We're hoping that people could just introduce themselves to one another in these small groups of about 4 people. Who are you? Why are you here? What do you want to get from the challenge? Why participate in it? And what questions come up? So just introductions, what are you hoping to get and give to the challenge? 8 minutes, and I think Claude's gonna send an invitation. You just click on that. It's gonna be a random assorting. We'll come back and see what you got from your time.
Okay, here we go, folks.
All right, here comes everybody now. We had a sort of staggered rejoining of about 2 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. We've already had one person share that they met awesome people. Anybody else meet awesome people in their breakouts? Yeah, yes. Somebody else shared really rich conversation and connections. And that just happened in 8 minutes. 8 minutes. So wow, you can create the space and make amazing things happen. So we did want to open it up for a few minutes just for y'all to share anything that came up, ask a question, make a comment. Please don't be shy. Put it in the chat, or you know what, go ahead and just take yourself off mute if you'd like to. Anything that came up that you'd like to share, or a question now that you've had a chance to connect with some great people. Anything? Anybody willing to share what you're hoping to get out of the oh, do I see K Rose Hughes? Did you just take yourself off of mute?
I did. I did. Well, I enjoyed the two people in my group immensely. And one of the things that came out of it for me was that, that this journey will likely help when I feel awkward or I'm afraid to move forward. I'm afraid I'm going to say something wrong or I'll be incorrect or whatever in various conversations, that hopefully going through this process will just build my courage in when we're in elements where there's a little bit of trust, that if I make an error, say something incorrect, that I can sort of just, pull myself back up and apologize, and people will know that the intentions were good, but maybe I was offbeat, and then I won't be silent, that I can try to be useful and helpful and get over the fear of making mistakes.
Absolutely. Love the comment. And yes, discomfort is not a bad thing. That's how we grow. And one of the frameworks we often talk about is, there's these 3 concentric circles of your safe zone, your uncomfort zone, and your panic zone. And sometimes people assume it's just safe and panic, but there is a buffer in there. And we can tolerate some turbulence, and we need it. Muscles rip to grow. Discomfort is how we stretch. And so, and there's also a room for grace, Karen, one of your favorite words. Do you want to say?
Absolutely. It's giving yourself grace and others giving you grace. That's why the community agreements are so important. So in your group, just sharing what you need, right? What you need helps them create the space that you are able to be fully you. As uncomfortable things as Curtis says may be at moments, that's the moment of growth, actually. Being uncomfortable is a moment of growth and moment of something different. But I think we also have to understand when we talk about the behaviors, having to be perfect, having to say the right thing, puts us into a mindset that's where we want to move away from. That's when we talk about white supremacist thinking, behavior, framing. We want to move away from that kind of stagnant way of being. We want to have this flow to be able to be something different.
Thank you.
Yes. And I was going to say that it just reminds us with some of the things we talk about are just, we got to change patterns. We've got to change patterns in order to get something new. And there's a line of poetry we often recite at our Food Solutions New England gatherings, William Stafford's A Ritual to Read to Each Other. The first stanza is, if you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, then a pattern others created will prevail. And following the wrong God home, we will miss our star. So if we get hunkered down and just no one's moving, no one's reaching out, no one's taking, moving to engage, then it's going to be the same. It's going to be the same, or it's going to be worse. So it's definitely an invitation to engage. Other questions, comments? Anyone? I think there was a question here earlier about the discussion guide that got answered. And then Hester had asked about inviting members of our own organization to join this HGP, or should we send them to the FS&E to sign up individually? Karen.
I would think, this is me talking out loud, that as I was saying earlier, when you sign up, I was going to drop it in, but I saw the other. When you sign up for the challenge, you will get the emails that are coming through, like the announcements of these webinars. The pre-work announcement will come directly to you, as well as the prompts, anything related to what we're doing from now until forever. But it really is helpful if there's some way that everyone is getting their information so that they can respond in that way. So whether it is that we figure out a way, you give us all the emails and we do something that way. We've done that before. That's something Lisa has done to let us know who signed up. But yes, it really is critical for you to be able to manage your own work in some ways as well. I'm thinking about this is your journey in this community. And in some ways, getting your things takes the onus on someone else to have to distribute. That would be what I usually think about in terms of that.
Great. So
I was about to drop in, somebody
Oh.
asked for the discussion guide,
Yep.
and I was about to drop that in. But before I do, I'm going to send the facilitators workshop. Just ignore it for now, it'll be there, because I already prepared it and I don't want to lose it.
Thank you. And I think we are about at time. We should transition. Joni, is that correct? Yes. So is that over to you, over to Gary? Yes.
Well, so what we have planned next is we have an introduction to a dance from Senderos, and then the actual dance. And the dance is called the Guelaguetza, and I'll let the introduction just tell you that story. But I really wanted to take a moment before we move there to thank Karen and Curtis. Thank you so much for the richness that you've brought to us today and for the work that you've done to create this incredible program. We're just so grateful to be a part of it. Thanks to Jimmy Panetta. Thanks to all of you for joining. And thank you so much to Senderos, our partners in this. I'm really excited to be sharing the video that's coming up next from them. And then we had a lot of promotional partners, local businesses who helped us get the word out about this. Bookshop Santa Cruz, Cabrillo Gallery, CCOF, Downtown Santa Cruz, Edible Monterey Bay, Fortress and Flourish, the Glass Jar and the Penny Ice Creamery, the Institute for Social Transformation at UCSC, Pacific Tax, Pajaro Loaves and Fishes, the Santa Cruz County Business Council, and the Santa Cruz Mountain Brewing. And I'm really excited to share these dances from Senderos. So let's move to that now. Thank you all for being here.
Oaxaca tiene mucha riqueza cultural. Somos uno de los estados de la República Mexicana con una riqueza cultural inmensa. Tenemos oficialmente reconocidas 16 lenguas indígenas. Yo soy zapoteca. También tenemos nuestra gastronomía, tenemos nuestro arte, tenemos mucha cultura, una riqueza cultural inmensa.
La quetza es una palabra zapoteca que significa el dar y sin recibir nada a cambio. En el estado de Oaxaca, básicamente los oaxaqueños, así es como nos conducimos. Nosotros apoyamos en momentos buenos, momentos malos.
Empanada de pollo, dame y una tlayuda con un chile asado.
Entonces, ¿por qué Guelaguetza en Santa Cruz? Para que la comunidad no invisible o no visible se vea visible, se haga visible y sea orgullosa de su etnia y de sus raíces.
De este sueño de los campos y el verde pastizal.
Entonces, en los Estados Unidos o aquí en Santa Cruz, los jóvenes, los adultos, les da vergüenza, ¿no? Les da vergüenza decir soy oaxaqueño. Y es una comunidad no representada, invisible, y con eso a nuestros jóvenes o nuestra comunidad pierde su identidad. Un individuo al perder una identidad pierde la cultura, se avergüenza de sus raíces y las próximas generaciones, con las próximas generaciones desaparecen las tradiciones. Entonces para nosotros era súper importante traer eso. Jenny llegaba a casa y nos decía, se están burlando de los oaxaqueños en la preparatoria donde asisto por el color de la piel, por cómo hablan el español, no lo están hablando bien. Entonces, eso pues nos dolía como oaxaqueños, pero también nos animó, nos impulsó a decir, bueno, Oaxaca tiene que hacerse presente, hay que enseñarle a la gente la riqueza cultural que traemos oaxaqueños. Los colores son los más bellos y nuestro color de piel es lo más bello que puede existir. Y sobre todo, pues, que nuestros niños en las escuelas tengan esa identidad, ese orgullo de decir, soy de Oaxaca, soy oaxaqueño, ¿verdad? Y esto es lo que traigo, esta es la guelaguetza, este soy yo. Es importantísimo tener esa representación aquí, porque, como dijo la doctora Robles, subrayar que nuestros jóvenes, niños, jóvenes y adultos se sientan orgullosos de sus raíces.
Oaxaca tiene mucho que ofrecer, es un estado riquísimo en varios sentidos y pues Oaxaca lo tiene todo, como el comercial. Oaxaca lo tiene todo. Es hermoso, es divino y como oaxaqueños pues ese es nuestro regalo y también pues lo pasamos de generaciones en generaciones. Un regalo que nosotros los oaxaqueños tenemos para la gente, la comunidad de Santa Cruz y el mundo.
Quisiera morir de sentimiento.
Es difícil, yo sé, pero por lo menos
Okay.
¡Arriba Oaxaca! Como solteco que soy, aquí te estoy dedicando esta bonita chilena, para ti la estoy bailando. Como solteco que soy, aquí te estoy dedicando esta bonita chilena, para ti la estoy bailando. Sola de Vega, te veo mi corazón, te dedico mi chilena y música de mi región. Sola de Vega, te dedico mi corazón, te dedico mi chilena y música de mi región. Y zapateale, parejito paisano. Y así se baila en Sola de Vega, Oaxaca. Esto es Sola de Vega. Écheme ese toro pinto, hijo de la vaca mora. Écheme ese toro pinto, hijo de la vaca mora, que lo voy a capotear delante de esta señora. Que lo voy a capotear delante de esta señora. Upa toro ya lo monte, upa toro ya lo lace, upa toro ya lo monte, upa toro ya lo lace. la Rincóname para todo el mundo. Y este es San Miguel, Sola de Vega. Traigo la vida en un hilo. Traigo la vida en un hilo. Por amar a una casada. Y ya lo supo su marido, pero no me ha dicho nada. No sé si lo hará de miedo o me la tendrá guardada. Arrincónamela pa' la orilla, arrincónamela pa' el rincón, arrincónamela pa' la orilla, arrincónamela pa' el rincón, arrincónamela vida mía, arrincónamela corazón, arrincónamela vida mía, arrincónamela sin calzón. Cuando salí de mi tierra, salí muy de mañanita. Cuando salí de mi tierra, salí muy de mañanita. Vine a ver a mi morena que se llama Margarita. Vine a ver a mi morena que se llama Margarita. Si Margarita le da y le da, mi Margarita, pa' allá y pa' acá. Sopilote, ¿qué haces ahí? Sentadito en el tunillo. Sopilote, ¿qué haces ahí? Sentadito en el tunillo. Esperando a mi sopilota pa' comernos el novillo. Esperando a mi sopilota pa' comernos el novillo. Sopilote que vuela, que vuela, que vuela puro pa' arriba. Sopilote que vuela, que vuela, que vuela puro pa' arriba. El que quiere carne come y el que no traga saliva. El que quiere carne come y el que no traga saliva. Y arriba San Miguel, Sola de Vega. Y arriba Oaxaca, señores. Un saludo a todos los amigos de Oaxaca. En el patio de mi casa tengo plantado un pitayo. En el patio de mi casa tengo plantado un pitayo, donde cantan las chicharras en el mes de abril y mayo. Donde cantan las chicharras en el mes de abril y mayo. Y la chicharra para cantar se pega al palo y se empieza a mear con el pico abierto sin desollar la pipirri sin desollar la pipirri, la pipirri, la pipirri, la pipirri, la pipirri.